The Expanded University, imaginative and boundless. Welcome to Expanded University short courses, where we talk about Star Wars Expanded Universe. I have with me a very special guest on this one. It is OG Star Wars, aka Alora. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, and it's certainly not the first time. We've
Right.
been talking about Star Wars together for over a year, along with many other friends, and it's been a great experience. But would you like to plug your channel before we get into the topic?
Sure. Yes, you could find my channel on YouTube, OG Star Wars. And that site there, the niche, it's specifically for George Lucas era of Star Wars. So pre-Disney content, along with even compare and contrast between the original lore and the new lore that's coming out. So please come visit, subscribe, and leave comments and support. It's greatly appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Mhm.
And if you're watching this on YouTube, we will have a link. And if it's on SoundCloud, there will also be a link. So definitely check that out. And you don't want to miss Alora's future content or the past content.
Mhm.
So we have a topic on this one that is, some people have called it a masterpiece. I certainly have. And when I read the book, when it first came out in 2005, I was taken aback and I was a little surprised at how good it was.
Right.
And you can do a lot of rereading on this one, and you may find something different every time or have a different experience every time. And it's the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover, Matthew Woodring Stover. He goes by a lot of different pen names, but it's a very unique novelization in a lot of different respects. And that's one of the main angles that we're going to approach this conversation. And it's not just, here's the story of the movie, maybe I add a little bit of color here and there. It's way deeper than that. Number one, it is Matt Stover, and he's a very interesting person, and it comes out in his writing style, certainly in everything Star Wars he's written. So it's a great book, and I thought it would be a great topic for us to talk about.
Yes,
for
I
your
definitely
first appearance on the podcast.
Yeah, and thank you again. And I have to agree. And this right here, Revenge of the Sith, turned out to be a trilogy. So basically, this would be the middle part of the trilogy, along with Labyrinth of Evil and Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader. And so if you get those two and you read them together, they do bleed into each other. There's a longer story, but Revenge of the Sith is basically, I would say, the meat and potatoes of the prequel trilogy, and it begins the dark times, going into the reign of Emperor Palpatine and Vader himself, and the hunting down of Jedi, all of that. So this is a significant novel, not only for the movies, but for the EU. This has a lot of EU content in it. He was brilliant when making this, because given the script by George Lucas, it'd be easy. Oh, I'll just write the script, like you said, Tim, color it up a little bit, we're done. He didn't. He went into depth. We have references to Shatterpoint. We have references again to Labyrinth of Evil, and into Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader, and it even echoes all the way to post Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, and some of the other material that he linked, maybe in just one sentence, but the fact that he acknowledged it. You've got Labyrinth of Evil, the Republic comics.
Correct.
Because that started with around issue 50 when it went from Star Wars to Star Wars Republic. The Tartakovsky Clone Wars,
Correct.
The Approaching Storm, Shatterpoint, the Cestus Deception, and even Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which is kind of a forgotten novel in a lot of respects. So there's probably more, but I have specific character stuff we'll get into. But all those productions, whether it's not live action, but cartoon or novels or comics, he took all of that and he found a way to weave it into it to make it feel like it was a connected universe. It was a connected universe.
Yeah.
So
And what I try to imagine with reading this, and then also knowing the other novels that surround it, and the novels, and even the comics that that he used or referenced or whatever, is sitting down with George Lucas, because he did go meet with him at Skywalker Ranch, and George Lucas has always said he wanted Skywalker Ranch to be a place where the creatives, whether it be the film or even the novels, can come in and do their magic, right? And so he got to sit with George Lucas, and I would just like, I wish I could have been the fly on the wall during that time, and
Yes.
imagine, like, okay, so we know George had read the comics. It's very apparent that he has, and just to hear them talk and reference not only the movies, but pointing out aspects of the EU to incorporate in there, because he got a lot of his ideas, and he got a lot of his I guess you can say, pointers from George when it came to this novel here. And also, Lucino is the one that sent with Matthew Stover questions and points and plot ideas for Labyrinth of Evil and even Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader, so that George can also give his pointers and his blessings or veto whatever he wanted to include in those stories.
Yeah, and
So,
I'm glad you're bringing that up, because it's the first thing I have on my list. He has this, he being Stover, he has this little post on the Jedi Council forums on the Force.net from the
mhm,
time, and here's what he said. And this is, again, to set this up, it's in regards to the canon conversation, and
mhm,
I think we're on the same page on what Star Wars canon is, and
mhm,
it's pre 2014 content, except for a few exceptions, stuff like, Star Wars Tales and Infinities and stuff like that.
yeah.
So that's what our definition of Star Wars canon is, not what you hear these days. It's, canon versus legends. To us, Star Wars canon is 1977 to 2014. So
Right.
to set this up, he had this little post that he made on the forums on the force.net, and he said, though I did not personally watch him do it, I received from LFL, that's Lucasfilm Limited, a
Mhm,
Word document of Revenge of the Sith with Mr. Lucas's edits, which was distinct from the edits I'd already gotten from Sue Rostoni and Howard Rothman. They're from the licensing department and the rest of the LFL crew. And this document was edited in such a detailed fashion that even individual words had been struck off and his preferred replacements inserted, as well as some passages wholly excised and some dialogue replaced with the dialogue from the screenplay. If that's
mhm,
not line editing, I don't know what is. What's
right.
in the book, or I'm sorry, what's in that book is there because Mr. Lucas wanted it to be there. What's not in that book is not there because Mr. Lucas wanted it gone.
Mhm,
Period. So that's what he said. So there's no mistaking the fact that Stover thinks that this book is canon, and if anything differs from the movie, then the movie overrides it.
right.
G canon versus C canon. But if
Mhm,
nothing's contradicted and it happens in that novel and George didn't strike it, then it's canon.
correct. Correct. And
So
that's even what he says in the acknowledgement. So a lot of these books that if you buy without the label, and I really encourage you guys to buy these books, find them in third hand, and you can find them in, like, I find a lot of great books, hardcovers, in antique stores that have your libraries in them. You can go to thriftstore.com or thriftbook.com or whatever, but when you find these books without the legends label, that are not reprinted by the Disney company, you will see the acknowledgments in them. A lot of books that have been reprinted, especially with the new cover, won't have the acknowledgments in them anymore. And so I think that's a dishonest thing that
agreed.
Disney is doing. And the acknowledgments for Revenge of the Sith is heartfelt thanks to Shelley Shapiro, Sue Rostoni, and Howard Rothman for remaining in my corner throughout the project, to George Lucas for responding to my queries, Okay, this is for Labyrinth, I'm sorry, but it still sticks because they were to, he did
Yes.
stuff over. Matt Stover for providing additional material and creative inspirations, and to Dan Wallace for sending me an early version of the prequel era chronologically. Or I can't even say that. Sorry. And then so he goes on and on and on, and references and thank and acknowledges everyone who was involved to get these books done. And like I said, it was a beautiful collaboration for this trilogy. And I think that's what strengthens the EU, even with these books and in outwardly as they reference other parts of the EU. So,
Yeah, and I do have some notes for later on what
mm-hmm.
Luceno did in his books and
Mm-hmm.
how it's almost like you forget who's writing what
Mm-hmm.
because it those three books that make a trilogy, Labyrinth and Dark Lord, along with this one, how
Mm-hmm.
they all kind of feel, I don't want to say they feel the same, but they feel consistent with the way that the character of Vader is portrayed. So
Right.
yeah, they all worked on this together to try and make it mesh, and that's wonderful.
Right.
Um, but in terms of some actual references from all those publications we read off earlier, there's a lot of surprises. Like there's mention, and here's what's great: the fact that they even mention the name in these meetings
Mm-hmm.
that Padme had was Garmbel Iblis because he was part of the formation of the Rebel Alliance, and just
Mm-hmm.
the fact he doesn't appear, but they mention his name as part of it. That's just great. And you take what's that game called? The Force Unleashed. And
Okay.
I really don't like what they did in that
Uh-huh.
game with the formation of the alliance because it was kind of like they shoehorned all that in and stuff. But
Yeah.
this was written, right around that time, and they took what they knew at the time.
Right.
It was Mon Mothma, it was Garmbil Iblis,
Mm-hmm.
it was Bail Organa, and
Um,
go ahead.
and then what's his name? Fang Czar,
Yeah, yep,
another one.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you later on it was like, yeah, there was a Mon Calamari involved, and maybe Bothans, stuff like that. But the point is, the main ones that formed it, they
Mm-hmm.
had them, they talked about him here. They didn't forget what Timothy Zahn did with Garmbil Iblis. That's his character he created. So
Mm-hmm.
great mention. The
Right.
fact that they didn't miss it is great because there's so much going on in this novel. Oh,
There
let's
is.
have this reference to Garmbil Iblis. The
Yeah.
fact that they didn't forget is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then you have a lot of references to Asajj Ventress and maybe one or two to Dirge, so they
Yes.
didn't ignore them. They were both in the Tartakovsky cartoon
Right.
and in the Republic comics.
Yeah. And what I thought was funny, and I don't know if you found it or you
Hmm.
remember it, or you may remember after I say it, is that Anakin was like, thinking about the dark side and stuff, and thinking about his fight with Asajj and how he got his scar. And he was like, basically noting, thinking about Asajj, and he's like, the dark side sure looks attractive. And I'm like paraphrasing right here, and that was what and I was like, yeah, that's kind of like a little glimpse into his mind frame there, and where he's headed, because, he fought, and I guess you could say an acolyte, and she
Yeah.
gave him the scar and stuff. And that fight was, amazing because it was also an indication of his turn, because she was threatening Padme and saying, I'm going to kill her to get to you. And he's like, bull crap. And they were on Coruscant. And that's where he basically almost sent her down into the underworld, and she got, caught up in all the wires and stuff. Very good comic. The Republic comics are amazing. So if you guys haven't had
Yes.
a chance to pick them up, read them. Very amazing.
Yeah, I totally
Very
agree, especially those early arcs that they
well. Mm-hmm.
had.
Right.
And they really make the character of Quinlan Voss. They before it even turned into Republic, they did a lot of great arcs with him, but that one really takes his character and drives it to completion before his arc pretty much ends. So,
Right. It's just like, it it just shows more depth into his arc, really, really fleshes like, and shows like, you know, how someone can be. I always seen him as a sentinel because he goes undercover. Even though his saber is green, I've always seen him as a sentinel. And, you know, he goes undercover, and that even plays, you know, during the time, a lot of these Jedi's minds were being, you know, corrupted or clouded or whatever. And their thinking wasn't clear because of Palpatine and what was going on and stuff. And that, you know, really gave us a great glimpse into that, you know, with his arc.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agreed. And then some great connections to Shatterpoint, which is another novel by Stover. It's a Mace Windu novel, part of the Clone Wars multimedia project. But Obi-Wan has a line where he says a very, very wise Jedi once told him, "We don't have to win. All we have to do is fight." And that
Mm-hmm.
line is directly from Shatterpoint. So what a
Yeah.
great, what a great callback to that.
Right. And then what gives me chills is like, because I've read the novel, and then the Audible is unabridged, so it's the whole complete novel on Audible. So I do drive around. If I'm driving, I don't feel like listening to music and I want to listen to a book, then I'll
Yeah.
play it, especially if it's unabridged and it's the whole novel. And basically Mace is standing there, and we got Palpatine, we got Anakin, and we have Obi-Wan, and he starts like reading their shatter points, and he's realizing, and he's going
Yes.
between each and every one of them, and then he starts seeing those lines that go connect into each and every one of them, and he realized how pivotal it is between all of them, and that how that's going to affect the universe, the galaxy. And that there, right there in itself, and he basically is like, should I act on it or should I just leave it alone? That's where he was conflicted.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what Mace's attachment was?
No, I don't.
You know, I'll tell you what it was, but it's on the surface, it seems kind of cheesy, but when you think about it, it's like, wow, that's a good point. But his attachment was the Republic.
Okay. All right.
He loved the Republic so much that
Mm-hmm.
in the novel, there's a scene like where he has this moment where he realizes that it's lost
Mm-hmm.
and he has to let it go.
Yeah.
And once he does, then it's time to go kick the Sith Lord's ass. But yeah,
Right.
it literally says
That is
that
right.
was his attachment. Maybe like Anakin is attached to Padme, and Obi-Wan was attached to Anakin later
Mm-hmm.
on in the book when in their final duel and stuff. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And uh what's interesting about that, while we're on that topic, like when Obi-Wan had that line, when he repeats the line from Shatterpoint, you can hear like Ewan McGregor saying that, even
Mm-hmm.
though it's not even talked. It's almost like an alternate movie that
Yeah.
we're reading here, because you can hear him saying it and even the look on his face. So it doesn't necessarily conflict with the movie, but it's almost like here's a slightly different version, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe we're adding on to it, and that's what's so
Depth.
cool about this book.
It's just depth. And
Yes.
that's what these movie novels are great, especially if they're well written and they
Yep.
still go, you know, in sync with the movie, is that there's more depth. There's more stuff that we may not be able to see on screen. And it gives a person a bigger perspective of what's going on, because when you watch the movie, I love Revenge of the Sith. It's my second favorite out of the two trilogies. And but I will say it did feel a little rushed. It felt like, you know, George didn't know what to include and where he wanted to go in a way, because there was so much information to give.
Yes.
And so he had to make those decisions on what exactly he needs to give. And we know that there's scenes cut out, like even the senators meeting in private about the formation of the alliance, to restore the republic. And that one thing, I think that was a mistake to be left out, because that would have gave a lot more depth when we see, you know, when we see Leia with the plans trying to
Yes.
find Obi-Wan, trying to get to Tatooine. I thought that was a big mistake for him to have left out. And so when we get to the book, that's why it's such a great novel. Like it's like I would say in my top 10, I think this would be my second one, I believe. I'm not sure. They always change, but this is will always remain up in the top two. Because of how well Stover did with it. Like you said, he did
Mm-hmm.
just add in flavor, and he basically each chapter covers a character, even Grievous, even Palpatine, even Anakin. There's like, you get to go in there and you learn about like what's going on in Anakin's heart with that dragon, that voice of that dragon, his conflict. That's how he's seen that. Now I have a question for you. So what'd you think about that dragon voice? Do you think it was maybe Palpatine or the dark side talking to him?
Yeah, I was reading that about that
Mhm.
tonight
Yeah,
in preparation for this, but interesting metaphor. I think it was himself. You know what I
right.
mean? I don't
Mhm.
think it was anyone else. I think it was his own temptation and transformation more than anything.
Yeah,
Because toward the end, he realizes, and that's another thing about this, like Stover was able to take some stuff that was kind of cheesy from the movie, like the
mhm.
monster scene, you know,
Yeah.
when they actually make Darth Vader and he
Mhm.
screams no. That scene, he's able to take it and go inside his head, and that's when he realizes, all along he's been behaving in an evil way, and he just kind of leans into it because he realizes he is the dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
it's
like
very,
it's
yeah, very interesting metaphor.
Yeah, I just wanted to get your opinion on that because people can interpret that so many ways, and I've heard people do that. And I'm like, I really don't think it was Palpatine or the dark side. I think that was himself. That was
Yep.
himself, his conflict, and maybe that dragon like persona started being born after and we could throw speculations out there or whatever our thoughts, that after he began his journey when he killed the Tuscan tribe, slaughtered them and stuff. Maybe that's when he started awakening that dragon, and maybe that dragon is also the dark side in himself, not the dark side talking about his dark side, because we know that
Yep.
everybody can have a dark side in Star Wars, and and it's your intentions and which way you want to go with it. So maybe that was the birth of that dragon, that persona, and
Yep.
it started just getting louder and louder and louder.
Yep.
So
We're
mhm.
on the same page. And
Yeah.
speaking of cutting stuff out, you're referring to the movie, but the book itself, they had to do the same thing, and completely absent other than it's happening, and there might have been a holographic message from there, is the battle on Kashyyyk. It's totally out of it.
Mhm.
There's no Chewbacca. There's
Right.
no Tarful. And I think that's good because he inserted other stuff or
Mhm.
included deleted scenes that we didn't see in the movie that
Yeah.
were more relevant, but just showing kind of the battle, it didn't really lend itself well to the written form, and was probably better in a visual medium because it's like a battle and stuff. It would have been like pages of, okay,
Which
here
is
come the tanks and all that type of
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
So
And
I thought that was a good choice to kind of leave that out.
right, and I was going through that too. When I was doing a little bit of research on the novel versus the movie and what was left out or not. Yeah, I agree. That was a better choice of him to do that too. Um, we already know what happened. Sometimes, like you said, the visual is much more better storytelling than the actual written part. And I think that was a great choice. I think he did a lot of great choices when it came to this novel. So,
Well, yeah, and then I have down as a note here his writing style. When I
uh-huh.
first read Traitor
Yeah,
in 2002, it was like, wow. I think it was 2002. It's like, wow, like that was no other Star Trek novel was written that way. And I knew at that moment nothing else ever would unless it were him again. And then Shatterpoint was very similar. Just his
mhm,
writing style, he does like some some scenes are in like the second person,
right.
some are in like the it's so different. And then just he'll say stuff like, this is how it is to
Mhm,
be Anakin Skywalker, and then he'll have like 10 pages and then end it with the same sentence. It's
right.
just really, really artistic and interesting the way that he writes.
Mhm. And I agree with that. And and I applaud James Luceno for copying that type of writing style when he got into Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader, because at the end, towards the end in the last chapter, we do get that sense this is what it is to be Anakin Skywalker. We get into that kind of conversation with his own self and his own feelings and stuff. And then have you read Dark Lord Rise of Darth Vader yet?
Yeah, I read it about a year ago, and
Okay.
I'm glad we brought that up earlier and right now, because in that book, it's pretty much the whole point of it is he's still trying to find himself, and it
Right.
continues on from Revenge of the Sith
Mm-hmm.
book.
Right.
He's still trying to figure out. I don't know if there's direct mention of the dragon. I don't recall that, but the the concept is still there. That
Mm-hmm.
is he Anakin, or it's like he refers to himself, as the Jedi. I think he doesn't think of Anakin; he thinks of the Jedi. That's how he thinks of who he used to be, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just very consistent how he follows up. Lucino follows up from this book, and then from his own Labyrinth of Evil that kind of kicked off the trilogy. Very, very rewarding to see all of that paid off in the last book.
Yeah, like I said, there is such great synergy going on between all
Yes.
of them. And if anything, this is like a trilogy. Like, okay, so you know how we always rate and tell people, okay, this is where you should start at, or this is
Hmm.
how we rate them. This right here, even though it's like towards the end, and it's like basically the beginning of the dark times, I would say if someone wanted to start in the beginning of the dark times and move their way through the comics and all that and all the way towards the OT era, is to begin with Labyrinth and read through this right here so they can have a full idea of how Anakin transforms. Because
Or
that's
think about it
basically
this Yeah, or think about it this way: if you're never going to read anything else, just
Mhm.
read these three, and
Yeah.
then maybe Darth Plagueis, and you should be pretty good. If you just want
Right.
to get some good background story and just
Hmm.
some good reading, read those four books in
Yeah.
the prequel era, and you'll be good to go. But I recommend reading all of them anyway.
Yeah. Same here. But I'm just saying, like this, like I said,
Yes.
brilliantly done. But the Battle of Coruscant here and how Sidious got kidnapped, but beforehand, like at the end of Labyrinth of Evil, which again, this all leads into just like Tartakovsky's Clone Wars leads into Revenge of the Sith novelization and movie. Basically, he tells was it Grievous about what's going on, that and Doku what's going on, or he tells Grievous what he told Doku, basically, you're gonna pretend capture me, basically, and this is gonna go on. I'm gonna make sure that you make sure you kill Kenobi, blah 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 blah, because if you do that, then it'll ensure Skywalker is ours, blah 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 blah. And so I think that was a really really good like insight of like how Palpatine orchestrated everything, both sides of the war.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but within the narrative, not from us, the reader, but or viewer, either way, but within the narrative, I think that's the first time they acknowledged Palpatine and Sidious are the same person. I don't think anything else like acknowledged that. I mean, we know it, right? We, the
Mhm.
reader, know it, but a character within the writing or
Mhm.
movies or TV or whatever, I don't think they've ever showed that they knew, hey, it's the
Mhm.
same. Because who would it have been? Would it have been Darth Maul? No, because he died in the Phantom Menace. Would it have been any of the Jedi? No, because none of them knew and stuff. So I think that's the first time when he has that conversation with the Count. I think that's when they first kind of reveal that, hey, another character knows who he is,
Right.
knows that Palpatine is the Sith Lord. So
Yeah, and it's
pretty
very
cool.
vague. Yeah, it's very vague, but you get the idea of that, and so it's also debated still today. About that. Did Doku really know? And you could safely say at the end of Labyrinth, yes, he does, because they have to pretend capture him. He is still, he is
Hmm.
still Sidious, because when you watch the movie and Anakin goes to basically decapitate him, and he's like, do it, kind of deal, and Doku
Hmm.
is like, oh shit, because he knows he's Sidious.
Yes.
When you read the novel, it even goes into it like, oh, he's got that tone of voice, that Sidious talking, and what the hell's going on? This wasn't in the plan, So, and he felt a little bit of betrayal going on because he didn't expect that to happen the way it did.
Yeah, he
So,
felt betrayal and he felt treachery because
mhm,
treachery is the way of the Sith. What a great little line that he added a few times in the book too.
mhm, yeah,
Treachery is the way of the Sith. And it
yeah,
is because it was this constant cycle of,
mhm,
I am the guy on top now or gal,
yes,
and my apprentice could take me out at any time. So
yeah,
that's kind of how the process worked. Now he did have a line like an internal monologue Doku did about he had a belief that Palpatine was gonna once he took over, he'd have like instead of a Jedi order, like have a Sith order with like a whole army and stuff. So there's a line that mentions that, and that's interesting because you could look at the one Sith from Darth Krayt that
mhm.
eventually that's kind of what wound up happening and
Yeah, it
stuff.
was
So
leading to that because to me, what I got is that he was reinventing the Sith by the
yeah,
time we got to Palpatine.
yep.
And we've seen the evolution of that. And so I thought that was brilliant on top of that. And, there's so much like pieces, like gems here and there as you go through the whole timeline, even outside of the book that we're talking here about here. And if you read through and like stuff that happened before and after, you will pick up those nuances.
Oh yeah, and little things like in Battle
Hmm.
of Coruscant, like you said, he mentions Karak cruisers and
Hmm.
Dreadnought
Right.
cruisers all the way back to like the late '80s from West End Games because
Yeah.
they were appropriate for that time period. Just the fact that he threw those in there is really freaking cool
Right.
because little references like that just and the people that don't know him, it doesn't hurt them to read that, but the people that do know him, it's like an added bonus. It's
Hmm.
not a member berry. It's different than a member berry. It's like, hey, look, cool. A
Hmm.
member berry for me is that's what they're relying on, to sell
Hmm.
the story
Yeah.
and to generate the interest. But when it's just like a little added bonus Easter egg, then it's really cool. So he mentioned that. I thought that he'd mentioned like Victory Star Destroyers, but I went back and looked and he doesn't. But he does mention
No.
those two other classes of battleships, so that's cool.
And he
Uh
even say invisible hand instead of giving the name of the ship in here. Sorry, I
yeah.
had to do
No,
that.
no, yeah, good point. Yep.
Because they did recognize like every ship like these like with Grievous and like Han Solo, for example, there's reason why they name these ships and stuff, and the reason why is to recognize who owns the ship as well. So there's like that recognition of who that ship belongs to and all that stuff. Because if not, then you're not going to really really know which is, especially for the common Star Wars viewer. They really wouldn't know unless it's referenced with the ship and what's the ship name and who owns it. Then you have a clear clarification of what's going on and stuff, and where the next target is and stuff like that. So I think it's very important. I think that that is now not that is that's being that's a failure, I guess you could say, with the new lore, and it's a disservice.
Agreed. You know
Hmm.
what I'd like to do sometime, and
Hmm.
sometime this is like a years long project. Have like an annotated version of this novel, and
Yeah.
have like, oh, here's where he's talking about Dirge,
Yeah.
and it's from Tartakovsky episode whatever, or it's from
Hmm.
Republic number 53 or whatever it may be, and then he's mentioning Carrack class cruisers. That's from the Imperial Source Book in 1989. Have like an annotated version. That
Yeah.
would be really cool to have. They did it with Heir to the Empire for the 20th anniversary, I think it
Mhm.
was, like in a silver book. I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
saw that.
it's the silver one. Yeah, that one's distinctive because it goes from the cover of like having the characters to bam, you have the
Hmm.
silver with the imperial emblem on top of it. Yeah. So I remember that.
Yeah, because this book, again, we've been talking for 35 minutes now about how rich it is and about how deep the references go and connections go, just to have an annotated version would be awesome. Maybe that's like a project we can get like a bunch of people contributing to. I think it would be cool to have that.
Do you write in your books? Do you annotate them?
You know what's funny is you asked that, but when I got back into reading Star Wars books again, because I moved several times and I had them in boxes, and
Mm-hmm.
then I brought them back out, got the shelves, put them in. I thought about, man, that would be cool to do that, but then I'm like, nah, I don't think I'll do that because I don't want to like ruin the books, right?
Yeah,
What about
just for
you?
collectibles. I have done some.
Hmm.
Yeah, with a pencil, especially if like there's some like important phrase or line or like important like, oh crap, this happened in this era and no one's ever
Hmm.
pointed that out, and so I have, and yeah.
Well, you know what I started doing is I started just taking photos of the
Hmm.
page with my phone, and
Hmm.
I just keep the photos maybe like on OneDrive or something so that I have it. And if I can, start flipping through the photos, I'll be like, oh, yeah, this is why I took a picture of this page. So that's
Okay.
like a pretty good alternative to doing that. But I've thought about it,
Yeah, and
so
I get
great
teased
minds
all
think
the time
alike.
about that. Yeah, I get teased about it all the time. I'm like, well, it's important information, and it is my book. I'm not going to sell these or whatever, but I get keep it in pristine because now they're becoming collectors. I get that,
Exactly. Yeah.
and we need to start like if I ever get like I do have some books with the Legends label on them, so like those ones are
I
highly
have one.
annotated. You have one, not me, but I do have a few, and but
Yeah.
like if it's hardcover, no, no.
No, no, don't do that.
Will not.
No,
Like
let me
everything
get let me
will
get Darth Plagueis and just mark it all up.
yeah.
I'll give like Palpatine a mustache on the front cover, and we'll be good to go.
Oh my
um, so here's something else that Stover did, and again, Lucas he he went over this line by line as we talked about earlier on. But
Mhm.
he did some interesting stuff by like providing more justification and explanation as for why Anakin did a lot of the stuff he did and a lot of other characters. But do you remember why in this book Anakin was so upset about not being a master? And it wasn't just pride, there was a actual specific reason why he was so pissed off. Do you remember what it was?
I know there's pride there. I didn't review it today, that portion
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it.
So here's
Yeah.
what it was. He wanted to be able to get into like
Oh,
the
that's right.
deepest
Yeah.
holocrons and stuff to try and
Yes.
find Darth Plagueis's secrets for
Yes.
eternal life, and he couldn't
Hmm.
do that if he wasn't a master.
Yeah,
I thought
correct.
that was brilliant.
And I wish they would have put that in the movie. That would have been a
Agreed.
simple, like maybe thought or whatever. Um, because then it would have given more depth. Then it wouldn't have made him look so
Hmm.
immature
Exactly.
at the time. And I think that was a lost, some like a lost opportunity of George is to give him more depth by allowing that just that simple way of like, that simple line or whatever, however he could have presented it. And it would have maybe had the fans, talk about him more positively in maturity during that time. We know he's matured a lot. We also know he's very conflicted, and Hayden Christensen did play him really well to George's standards and how he wanted him to portray Anakin Skywalker and his fall. But that little simple information would add more depth. I
Yeah, and
agree. Mhm.
they could have had a quick little scene in the movie where he confronts like Joe Costanew when he's trying to get in
Mhm.
or something, and
Yeah,
she doesn't let him. That would have been a cool scene and
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
So, but it's we got what we got, but the book itself does it, and I thought that was a brilliant move that
Mhm.
he made. Going back to Darth Tyrannus. So in this book, Stover basically takes the old expanded universe, the old West End Games route, and
Yeah.
basically makes him like a racist. And he wants to have like a humanocentric empire once the whole plan is
Mhm.
is in the works and stuff. But if you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, when he was younger, his master was Yoda, right? And he
Mhm.
was pretty loyal to him. But you can still explain that and say, well, that was a long time ago. And he's probably such a fanatic now. If he thinks that that's what his new master, Palpatine, wants. But I think that, and I made a whole video on this, I think that the reason Palpatine did it was more for like control than
Yeah.
something he actually believed in. But
Mhm.
he did have a couple of lines where it's clear that he doesn't like the Gungans and he thinks they're inferior and stuff like that.
Yes.
But I thought that was an interesting choice to say, hey, Count Dooku is like a racist against
Xenophobic.
non-humans.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. And that, like, again, that because his book, it's the end of the Clone Wars, right? It's stealing off the Clone Wars era and the PT era and opening up the dark times. And so we get to see, the shift, the dramatic shift Palpatine or Sidious creates, and
Hmm.
how he wants everything sterile. Because that's
Yeah.
what Empire was, pretty sterile. And like, you have the white or black walls, everything's like very sleek, clean, uniforms are sleek and clean, very sterile. It's supposed to feel safe for
Hmm.
people because it's all an illusion.
Hmm.
And then to build that sterile environment, and then the super weapon, this is where you start imprisoning, other worlds, and that includes, because humans are not the main species. They are basically what you would call colonizers and stuff, right? Because they're like all over the galaxy, and inhabiting a lot of planets if feasible or whatever. And so he wants to rule over, and he wants to make humans the predominant species. And so now he's basically enslaving like Wookiees and other races or
Yep.
other species,
Hmm.
build the empire. And so that's the beginning of it. That's the beginning of his xenophobic, and that's what, and then his people underneath him start following suit, and it starts creating that xenophobia kind of environment. And it's very apparent, especially with some of his like, what is it in A New Hope? What is that thing? He probably knows
Yes, that
what
was
it
in
is.
my video. Yep.
Right. And, so we get that. And so that, I think that was another brilliant thing that he put in there to start showing and indicating, even though Dooku doesn't live, the beginning of the dark times. So,
But then there's Tarkin, and
mhm.
he was very much that way. People don't realize this, but Admiral Akbar was Tarkin's slave
Mhm.
until he escaped.
Yep.
So yeah, it was definitely a thing. Some people will try to deny it and say, well, hey, look at Sly Moore and all this stuff. Well, she was near human.
Mhm.
Look at Masa Meda and stuff. Well, it doesn't mean that he's not going to use people,
Oh yeah, he
as he
uses
sees
them.
fit. Hmm.
Mhm. And that's the very
So,
part of being xenophobic. You'll use them until you don't need them anymore. There's no
yes.
compassion. There's no kindness. There's that mask, basically, that Palpatine has put on.
And
That's
look at Thrawn. He
mm-hmm.
did it with Thrawn. And I can't remember that. Is it like in the Empire's Service, the comic with Baron Fell? He
Yeah,
shows Fell like being sympathetic to Thrawn because, man, like he's the one that masterminded all these battles and stuff, yet he gets sent to the unknown regions while the human admirals and stuff get to take all the credit and all the glory and stuff. So,
right.
yeah, it was definitely a thing. It wasn't just something that you could infer. It was blatantly told
Mm-hmm.
to us that, hey, the Empire is definitely humanocentric. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the fact that he tied it in to this book is pretty interesting. And then another thing with Anakin that you could probably watch the movie and say, yeah, I think this is what's happening, but it's stated in the book that he doesn't sleep anymore because every
Mm-hmm.
time he sleeps, without fail, he has the dream, right,
Right. Mm-hmm.
of Padme dying or being dying in childbirth, whatever it was. So
Yeah.
he stops sleeping, and that's why he looks like complete crap.
And that's why
throughout
his
most
mind
of
is
the
like
movie.
complete crap
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you don't sleep, even if you try to, like, regenerate yourself with the force, eventually it's going to catch up with you, and then you start making irrational decisions, and he definitely starts doing that more and more throughout the story. So that
Mm-hmm.
was an interesting insert as well, because again, you could watch the movie and say, I think that's what's happening,
Yeah.
but if you don't really pick up on that, then it's like you don't even notice it. But in the book, it's actually stated that that's what's happening. So
Yeah.
cool.
And another thing on that with his nightmares and Padme's death, and I don't know if you have the same thought as I do about this, is that he is getting these visions of the future. We already know what they are in Star Wars because they are just one glimpse of one possibility, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so he's getting these visions of the future. So he thinks I need to go learn the dark side because the light side is not going to teach me how to save people, like
Yep.
mortality. So I need to go. And so he's rushing off, and he's desperate. He's very, very desperate. Little does he realize is that he's the one that causes the death.
Yes. Yep.
Trying to save her and turning dark is what causes the death. So if he would have just not gave in to that selfish, and attachment's not about love, not about marriage, whatever. It is about being selfish and wanting to possess someone, right? In Star Wars. And so you could still love and be married. Like we see that in the coming lore, towards, the OT and post Return of the Jedi. And Anakin Skywalker is one of them that really hones in on what attachments is when he's trying to get his father to straighten up his ass. Oh, sorry, I cuss. But, and, so that's a great clip. You can find it on my channel. So, he's really possessive, and he basically doesn't know how to function if she dies. He's losing himself.
Oh, yeah. And that goes back to the dragon, too. When
Mhm.
that was part of it. When he
Right.
becomes Vader in the armor, he realizes that it's all my fault.
Right.
But he
And
doesn't care. He keeps on going. He leans into it.
yeah, he keeps on leaning into it because it's all about possession. It's all about losing himself. He's thinking he's losing her, but he's losing himself. And
Yes.
so if he didn't go down that path, and this is just what ifs now, then more than likely, because of the visions of the futures, is just one possibility, she may not have died. Because he
Good
sees the
point.
vision of her, and she's wearing the white, shirt and stuff from the hospital and stuff, and she's crying. He's seen that exact same vision of her as she's given birth. The same exact one. And so I was like, wow, so that was well done because it goes back and it echoes back into A New Hope, or, into the OT, into Empire Strikes Back, on Luke's visions of the future of, Leia and Han and all of them on Bespin or Cloud City, and how Yoda tells them, don't respond to it because it's just one possibility. You need to stay here. If you do, your friends may die. There you go.
Yep.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So well done.
Yeah, totally consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another interesting one. So Palpatine tricks the Jedi Council into sending Obi-Wan to Utapau because he wants him away from Anakin. Because
Right.
he suggests why don't you send Anakin to go take out Grievous? And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't tell us what to do. We're sending Obi-Wan. And then it's kind of like he smiles and gets what he wants. And by the way that he writes Palpatine is great. It's
Mm-hmm.
like just perfect. Like just a little bit hammy and cheesy and stuff. Like he's constantly like
You could
smiling
tell. Yeah.
and winking at people and stuff like that. That's great stuff.
Yeah, he's like it feels like he's winking to the audience because when he gets his way.
Yes.
Through
Yes.
his manipulation and stuff. And yeah, I remember, that's a great point as well, because like the beginning where you get from Labyrinth of Evil into that transitions into Revenge of the Sith novelization, he basically is telling them the lowdown of like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And then when we get to that section there in the novel Revenge of the Sith, and way before he gets the council to decide it's Obi-Wan and he gets his way, he basically discusses that, like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And it's going to be
Yes.
Obi-Wan, and I'm like, holy shit, that's great.
Yep.
And little do they know that they're feeding right into his manipulation as well. The Jedi are his victims as well as the galaxy.
Yes, totally.
Yep. And then
And
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm not trying to steer away from this here, but I meant
Hmm.
to say this a while ago when we were talking about you know, Palpatine and all
Hmm.
his minions and stuff. Well, Asajj Ventress, she was slated to die in Revenge of the Sith.
That's interesting.
She was slated to die in there. Instead, she wasn't even written in. So I
That
believe
would
that.
have been cool to see live action.
Yeah, that is probably something that maybe George probably said nope. I'm just speculating on that one, but because how him and the company gave pointers and what to do and not to do. So one of them was like, okay, we're not going to use him, and I think it would have been interesting to see, but then and I think it would
Yeah.
take away a little bit of the story as well, because we still have Dooku in there and Grievous, and I think there was, like I said, there was so much going on in the movie in itself, and then so much going on in the novel. The novel can cover a whole lot and stuff. So it was probably a wise decision, even though myself, I would have loved to see what would have happened with her,
Yeah, I totally agree.
because she
You
does
know what?
disappear.
You know what bums me out is that they took out the "Hello there" line when he
Yeah,
goes to Utapau. It's like, man.
they do. And I was like listening to it and then reading it, and I'm going back and forth. I'm like, this Audible is unabridged. I pick it and open up the book, and I'm like, damn, it's not in there either.
I don't
That's
think he realized how iconic that line would become. So
right. I was like, oh, come on now. You just like disappointed me right there. That was iconic. But
definitely.
yeah, you're right on that.
And
So
there were minor differences in every scene. Like, let's say when he goes to Mustafar and he takes out the Separatist Council, like
mhm.
the dialogue's different, and
Yeah.
he's kind of dropping like these cheesy one-liners and stuff like
That was
that.
funny. Like he was like the what did he say? That our city's offered us a pretty reward or something like that. And he goes, "What? Am I not pretty?"
Yeah,
I was like,
and
"Damn."
then there's one like that says something about leave us in peace, and he's like the message was garbled and he said leave you in pieces, like strikes with the
Yes.
lightsaber. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think we're
that's
starting to see glimpses of Vader's lines. Like it started evolving there.
mm-hmm, for
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah, it started evolving there because we know Vader is brilliant for his one-liners or his commentary that he does. And I think that was another fun thing, because we get from cheesy and him
Hmm.
transforming into this like badass, villain, like all-time villain that really nails it in with his sarcasm.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then
So
here's a really interesting thing that goes back to the style. He writes a scene from the perspective of someone being mind tricked by the force. And it
mhm.
was I can't remember exactly verbatim, but it's something like, you know, the Jedi utters the line, and then the person, like you're the person, and you're thinking like, well, this is a pretty trustworthy fellow, and stuff like that. So I don't think anyone had done that before. Like, I'm being mind tricked, and I'm writing that scene from that perspective. So that was like that was classic Stover right there as well.
Yeah, because I remember like in Legacy of the Force, which one was it where Jaina goes to the temple was taken over by the gag. And she was
That must have been in the one I'm reading now, Inferno, I'm thinking.
maybe I think it is it is Inferno. Jeez, and that's my favorite one in there. I should have known that. But and yeah, and so he kind of like says, "Oh, well, you're not going to trick me with the mind tricks," but it's still different. But he still goes into like and mocks her on like trying like a Jedi using the force to do mind trick and stuff like that, and nuts. And he's like, "I'm not weak minded," and she's like, "Well, then why are you following my brother?"
Oh, yeah, I literally just read that scene like less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. So that was pretty good. But Stover, again, with his brilliant writing, I think he really took the time, and maybe with his meeting with George and just getting to pick George's brain, who basically has the universe in his head on his ideas and stuff like that. Maybe just sitting down with him really helped him open him up with this novel to really get into the different perspectives of these characters, because we basically, each chapter is either of a couple of characters or one character. Like chapter 2 is Dooku, and and then we go to Padme later on, and it goes on and on and on. And I really think that was brilliant, and how we got the script in here, and how we got the character, and how the characters are responding during that time. So,
what did you think about the expanded scene between Yoda and Qui-Gon? Because it's not in the movie at all. And then basically Yoda says that he is now Qui-Gon's apprentice. I thought that was pretty cool.
That was brilliant. That's in the New Jedi Order chapter. And that's like, okay, so I love, like I said, I love everything in this book. But because I grew up reading mostly post Return of the Jedi, because that's basically what came out first, that really hit home. Because we see in the movies, especially when the movie came out, he tells Obi-Wan, we're basically going to get visited and trained by your old master. And he's like, what, Qui-Gon? And so this really hits it home, because
yes,
Yoda meditating. We know Yoda was meditating before Obi-Wan got there. And as Obi-Wan got there, he was in meditation, trying to figure crap out. Like, what's going on? All this happened. All this happened. The Jedi are gone, all this. And then, so we don't get to see him talking with Qui-Gon, but that's the same scene. That's the same scene. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's expanded, and it sounds like Yoda.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
How he should sound and stuff like that. So nice little insert. Yep.
Yeah, very humble. He is very, very, very humbled. And I really, really like that. Like I said, this last chapter I refer to a lot when it comes to especially post Return of the Jedi stuff that people try to talk against, and or even with Yoda and with the fall of the Order. And he recognizes the flaws, and he recognizes, because he's been there for nearly 1,000 years, and he's helped trained and become a Grand Master, that he was basically training them to fight the Sith from 1,000 years ago, not evolving, not allowing the Jedi Order to evolve, and not allowing them to be more open-minded.
And more than once, too. More than once, Yoda he acknowledges that in this book. So,
yep, exactly. And after this whole realization, like, the Order's gone, while the temple, everything's gone, there's only 2 remaining Jedi that they know of. And so it really just drives the nail into the into reality, I guess I would say coffin. But yeah, and he has those revelations. And then part of his revelations now is that because the Jedi failed to evolve, and then he's thinking of now the twins, the Skywalkers, that are strong in the Force, that the Skywalkers, the children, will be, bring about the new Jedi Order. And I think that was a brilliant bridge right there. I don't think it was done just solely through Stover's ideas. I think the company and George too wanted it to evolve, because like you said in the beginning, everything in this novel here is here because George wanted it to be here.
Yeah, otherwise he would have struck it with his little pen. So
exactly. And people don't realize that. People don't realize like not only this novel, but a lot of these novels, even if like the ones where he just got the plot points with ideas, he had the say. He was like, okay, and he's even canceled, like Heart of the Jedi, the novel that we all got copies of before it got canceled again. That was one that was stuck in limbo and may not have even came out because that didn't really fit to what George wanted. And that's a great example, even though it's a great story. That's a great example. And people don't realize that he was really involved in what and had to say and what went on in his saga. And yes, it is his saga. Everything that happens, unless it's labeled infinities and, in non-canon area, it's all linked to the saga. It's all one saga.
Yes, totally agreed.
Yeah.
Let's see here. There's so many things, we're gonna miss. We're gonna miss something. Yeah, we're gonna miss something. But he inserts a lot of different stuff. He talks about the lightsaber forms and stuff
Yes. Yes.
in detail, so that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, shoot, I just want to make sure we try to at least hit all the big stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess at this point we can talk about some of the stuff that kind of ruined the book, like a lot of the stuff that happened in the 2008 Clone Wars
Oh,
cartoon
God. Yeah.
kind of just contradicted not just the Tartakovsky, not just the Clone Wars comics, but this, because this Revenge of the Sith was tied into those books.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand it. And that's, for me, like, they're not really, you really can't resolve them.
Mm-mm.
So I just say, this is what I count as being real, because I don't like 2008 Clone Wars at all.
No, I don't. I don't care for. Yeah, there was some scenes, some things I really liked in there, but a lot of it, it's like it just destroys what came before. And when it starts intruding into a movie novel and the movie itself,
Mm-hmm.
well, then that's where the movie and its novel and stuff supersedes it.
Yeah,
That's how.
I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, and I know there was like, what is the name? Captain Fordo. He did a huge couple of times, two back-to-back series on the destruction that the Clone Wars has caused. The second video basically has the timeline of every single novel that was affected by. So in the middle of the timeline is every single episode of
Yeah.
the Clone Wars, and then there's the novels that it's affected. And Revenge of the Sith is a major one that it contradicts so bad, and I don't agree with it. I'd rather, I will stick with Tartakovsky's. Tartakovsky's opens up, like it ends and opens up Revenge of the Sith, both novel and both movie, and it's fun to watch. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't like the cartoon art." That's fine. I think that I don't mind it. If you look at Tartakovsky's style, that's his style. But the story was brilliant. Yeah, some of the story was over edge, like Mace Windu force pushing all the droids down. But I think because it's a cartoon, you're going to see there's going to be some things with cartoons where it's going to be over the top. That's just how it goes. And I don't think that was such a bad thing, but I just loved how it kept continuity, and it kept continuity with like Anakin and Asajj Ventress, and even with Barriss Offee and her going to Ilum
Yep.
to get her crystal. I mean, there's so much depth into that. There was so much, and they were just little tiny shorts too. They were just shorts that were like not even like 20 minutes, not even, and they had a lot of story.
Yeah, and people are going to complain about that animation style, but like 2008, like, uh, I mean, come on. Oh, it's 3D and it's CG and all that. Yeah, but I didn't like that style, the
Mm-mm.
2008 Clone Wars style. Like,
No,
look at Dooku. He looks like a block,
the blockhead. Talk
Look
about
at the
block.
Wookiees. Remember what the Wookiees look like?
Yeah.
I didn't like that. So it's about the story
Mm-hmm.
and and allowing an artist to use their style. And if you don't like their style, fine. But the storytelling, and then you talk about the droids and Mace Windu, it's like, I think that, number one, I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility that a Jedi of his caliber could have done that,
Yeah.
like a force push. But, let's not focus on that, and let's focus on the characters and all that. And when you get all this off the wall stuff that they did with, like, the son and the father and whatever,
Yeah.
that that focus on that, like, that's far-fetched, not Mace Windu force pushing a bunch of battle
Mm-hmm.
droids.
Right.
So
Right.
that's the way I look at stuff. Like,
So what do you
is
think
it
about Grievous then? Because we have two depiction of Grievous in the Clone Wars, like both Tartakovsky's and Filoni's. And then, they both lead into the novel and the movie. So I really think that Tartakovsky's depiction was way better.
well, yeah, and then the cough,
Mm-hmm.
they explain that,
Right.
because I think it's Mace Windu, like, damages his the casing
Yeah,
on
he does. He
his.
does Shatterpoint, I believe. Or I don't think it's Shatterpoint. Yeah, I think he just went ahead and force squeezed his center, or
Yeah,
and made it and collapsed it on each other on itself. And he's mostly cyborg, but he does have some organics in him, and that's including his lungs. Yeah, so that's Mace is the one that gave him that wheeze cough situation.
yeah, and
Uh,
he's coughing in the last episode of Tartakovsky. So,
mhm.
but in 2008, it's not explained, and he just has always been doing it and stuff.
Yeah.
And that tells you that they just completely ignored what came before and just started
Mhm.
doing what they wanted.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And then so now, since we're kind of like towards talking about this, we do have Palpatine getting captured, and we do have like it was Shakti. Who was with Shakti again? It was Shakti, and I have my notes here. Let me see if I can get it. But they're the ones that are protecting Palpatine from being captured. And when Revenge of the Sith novel was being finalized, Tartakovsky began working on the Clone Wars, and so there's a minor discrepancy between the two
mhm.
because of that. They try to correct it as much as they could, but the scenarios are slightly different from Palpatine's capture in Tartakovsky's and Palpatine's capture in Labyrinth of Evil.
Yeah, I did read about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. But again, that's when it comes to Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
continuity,
Yeah.
you override one
Mm-hmm.
that is higher up on the canon scale. So
Yeah. Well,
that's
what would you
that's
think that
what
would
would
be?
happen here.
What do you think
Um,
it would be Tartakovsky's at the time would be since it's a animation, or do you think the novel since Labyrinth of Evil since it ties into the movie? They both do, so that one's a difficult one.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if Tartakovsky was considered T canon at the time. I don't think T canon existed. I
It
think they
didn't exist
invented that
for
for
Filoni because he's throwing a fit
yeah,
because he wasn't a part of
yes.
the G canon.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's one that we'll have to wrestle with and come up with an
Mhm.
answer for later. But
Yeah.
it the point is it didn't change what happened. It's just who was there and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. They still protected him. They still, Grievous
hmm
still
hmm
kidnapped him. So there's not that much. And we know like Star Wars is such a huge, expansive history, like sci-fi fantasy history of lore that there's always going to be a little tiny bit of hiccups that they correct later on, which is not a big deal. And one example, and I'll just go there, is Boba Fett. We get his story. Yeah, we get his story, and it keeps on evolving, especially after the PT comes out. And then people are like, oh, well, it's a big contradiction. Not really, because, bounty hunters do use aliases. And so that's basically what he's
hmm
using, blah, 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 blah. So that's very plausible. And so there's very minor discrepancies that were easily taken care of later on. And,
exactly.
so people don't realize that, and it's such a big, huge, expansive history, very successful in itself. So.
I remembered what the point was earlier that I wanted to make. So, Order 66.
Okay, there you go.
He kind of breezes through it, but here's another thing that he, just like with the Anakin stuff earlier, that he inserted that made it all make a lot more sense. So, how are the Jedi taken off guard? Well, Order 66, it was just the clones obeying orders. So they
Right.
didn't have any malice. They were just doing what they were told. They didn't enjoy killing their friends. For a couple of years now, they'd been following the orders and being taken care of by the Jedi generals and commanders and stuff. So that's why the Jedi didn't see it coming, because they were just following orders.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to do it, but they had to do it because they were following orders, and that's
Yeah,
what they
so
were
no chip.
bred to do.
And so no chip.
Yeah, no chip, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, they
But I
were
thought that
they
was a
were
good way to explain how did they, like, you see what's his name, Ki-Adi Mundi, and he's
hmm
genuinely shocked in the movie and stuff, like, how is this happening? Because they didn't see it coming because the guys didn't want to do it, but they had to do it.
Yeah.
So there was no malice in it. And you can tell even in the movie, it's not like they're enjoying it. They just aim and shoot because at the bare minimum, that's what they have to do.
Yeah, and like with what do you call it, Ayla Secura, I think I remember reading, I forgot where it was, that they didn't want to kill her because of her how well she led them and stuff, and that's why they just
Mm-hmm.
like all did it and turned it at once to get it over and done with, and that is friggin' tragic in
Yes.
itself. And then it ties into Karen Travis's Commando series, and later on where you see like I just got done reviewing last Thursday Blood Ties, and how the son of a clone who defected, he later called himself last name Freeman. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
agree, and he didn't agree with what they're being created for and stuff, and so he defected. And so that offers more depth and writing. So if someone's going to take these clones and have one defect, then you're going to have a deeper story.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so that was a great connection right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are all my notes.
Mm-hmm.
Let me do a double check here. Yeah. Do you have anything else you can think of?
Not necessarily, other than, let's see here. How about I know there's a lot of conversation with like Padme and Obi-Wan. And
Yeah, yeah, because he really played up the possibility of like a love triangle happening more than the movie did for certain.
Mhm. Yeah. And so Obi-Wan goes in, and I think this is like, I'm not too for sure, but I think this is after or right before Anakin gets put on the council.
Mm-hmm.
But he goes and checks up on Anakin, and notices how he's been stressed and what's going on, and all this other stuff, and she's like, what are you talking about, so she questions him and stuff as well. And after Obi-Wan leaves, and he does have suspicion about her and Anakin.
Yes.
So we have that leads, it starts leading into that. And then after he leaves, Anakin comes in, and he's like, why was Obi-Wan, and he kind of senses him in the Force being there. He's like, why was Obi-Wan leaving so early in the morning from here?
Yeah, and he could even sense like how close they were sitting on the couch and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was crazy. He
Yeah.
exhibits like even if he hadn't been turning to the dark side, he's exhibiting like a lot of abusive behavior and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And that goes into, so did you read Darkness trilogy at all?
I you know what? I never read those. I have
Uh-huh.
them, and they're. I need to go back and read them after maybe because I'm going to do Legacy. Then I'm going to do Commando series, and then
Yeah.
maybe I'll go back up and do Dark Nest, and then
Okay.
I don't know, maybe Fate of the Jedi or something.
Yeah. Well, in that trilogy, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of spoilers, and so maybe it'll make you like look forward to reading them. But
Hmm.
R2 malfunctions and starts, and it's a deep core memory malfunction, and he starts revealing the past of like that scene where that we're talking about with Obi-Wan and Padme, and then Anakin. It starts revealing that, and it starts revealing a lot, and even when they're on Mustafar and he's force choking her. So that's being revealed to the family, like Luke, and Luke's like stuck in disbelief because he's like, I gave my forgiveness to my father.
Right,
And it's like, and it covers up so much. And I think you might like that better than what Leia was doing, and or like her discovery in Tatooine Ghost.
right.
Um, I think you'd probably like that one better. That flashback to the PT more so than what the Tatooine Ghost did. I think so, because it lends into Jason's fall, and we get to start seeing Jason's fall and how he's starting to think like Anakin or Vader and Palpatine of that time.
Yeah, and that's we can touch on that really quick. Like in Legacy of the Force, again, I'm on
Mhm.
book 6 right now. I
Yeah.
have about 100 pages left. His flow walking and all that, it really does connect his character to his grandfathers in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways, and a lot of what's going on here in Revenge of the Sith. So I've
Mm-hmm.
been really enjoying all that stuff. And
Right.
it's that flow walking stuff's interesting because it's like he can potentially affect history and stuff and he would never know it because, if he does change reality, then he wouldn't know it because it would have already changed. It's really interesting if you think about it, but he
Mm-hmm.
tries to stay out of the way of everyone when he does that, and he's seeing what his grandfather did and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, and he's like, "Well, I'm not the same as him because I have different reasons and stuff like that." So in a lot of ways, that
Ability. Yeah.
yeah, that ties into Revenge of the Sith here.
Mm-hmm. And that's with the Darkness trilogy, because he gets to see some of the clips from their interaction, Anakin and Padme's interaction. And Mara's like, man, your father's abusive.
Hmm.
And Luke's like in disbelief. And then Jason sticks up for Anakin. So it's very interesting.
That's
Very
cool.
interesting. Yeah, so there's some glimpses into that. And so that right here, this all ties into Revenge of the Sith. And Troy Denning uses the scripts from the novels from the movie, just like Matthew Stover did. So very,
Nice.
very, very good. I'm like, holy crap. And I love continuity. I love to research and link everything together. So I'm like nerding out on it. People are like, we don't like it because of the bugs and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, but the continuity with the family linking up to the past and the future and Jason's fall. I said that's what the meat and potatoes in that series is about. Very, very, and so if you really like Legacy of the Force, I think that even if that's like, okay, I can read that once and I not revisit it, I think it'll give you a bigger perspective on Jason's fall.
Yeah, and I might like the bugs too. So
Yeah. The Killicks. Yeah, the Killicks. Yeah, so it's a Troy. I think all three of them are Troy Denning, I think.
yeah,
So
they are. He did all three of them. Yeah.
okay. Yes. Yes. So that's another great tie-in to Revenge of the Sith right there.
Yeah, so everyone listening, if you don't own it, get Revenge of the Sith novelization. I've seen it
Mm-hmm.
in paperback everywhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
out there. Get it. Get the audio. Get it all because it's a fantastic Star Wars book. And if you never read any other prequel books again, read Labyrinth of Evil, Revenge of the Sith, Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader, and Darth Plagueis.
Okay.
And you'll have read what you really, really need to read in the prequel era for sure, because it's really all about Darth Vader
Mm-hmm.
and Palpatine, and that's what those books are about. So
Right.
good stuff. Thanks for being here again. Her channel is OG Star Wars on YouTube. So definitely subscribe. There's videos and shorts every single week. And then, of course, subscribe to my channel, Open-Airlock Policy on YouTube. I don't do as many videos as she does, but I definitely do them and stuff
Mm-hmm.
and make shorts and stuff like that. Thanks for listening and thanks for being here again. And I'm sure in a couple of months here, I'm going to rotate guests out. You'll be back. So thanks for
Okay.
doing this.
I look forward to the next one. Yes, thank you so much for having me here. We could have been here longer. I mean, we can go on for another hour.
Exactly. Exactly. What's the next book here? No.
I
So,
know, right?
yeah. And thanks to everyone for listening to Expanded University short courses. And we'll see you in the next one.
Have a good night, Dave.
The Expanded University, imaginative and boundless.